Alrighty. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody tuning in from around the world. This is our first episode of Resonance's Cultivating the Future Through Food webinar series. This is going to be a monthly series where we will be discussing topics from the leading edge of partnership, innovation, and action for a sustainable global food system. My name is Seth Olson, and I'm a Strategic Partnerships Manager at Resonance on our Impact Advisors team, which focuses on delivering innovative partnership solutions to corporate, foundation, and NGO clients. I'll be the host for the series and will be moderating today's discussion. Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to reflect on why we're focusing on food system transformation in this series. Well, the matter of the fact is, companies and governments are increasingly taking bold leadership and making big commitments on sustainability in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, as seen here, and the Paris Agreement. And actions are starting to follow, but we really do need to significantly accelerate action over the course of this decade in order to reach our shared global goals. And as many of you tuning in will know, a sustainable food system is foundational to a sustainable future. So this is our attempt, Resonance's attempt, to help empower, energize, and connect leaders and practitioners from across sectors to drive impactful action at scale. I hope you'll follow along and join us for every episode of this series, which again will be once a month. But today we're turning our attention to the circular economy for food, which is a crucial pathway for the food system to become more sustainable, and also touching on the importance of collaboration and partnerships in this space. What exactly are circular approaches in the food system? Well, they include producing food in ways that regenerate nature, reducing the truly tragic share of food that is currently lost or wasted. It's about a third of food globally. If food loss and waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and it's almost $1 trillion in lost value each year. And finally, also the circular economy for food includes productively using commonly wasted resources like processing byproducts and even human waste. For anybody who's interested in learning more about the circular economy for food, please go ahead and check out the platform for accelerating the circular economy's circular economy action agenda for food. That is enough from me now, though. Today, I am super excited to welcome our panelists today. We have Anna Steffens and Greg Belt joining us. Anna and Greg, do you want to come on in and join us? Greg is the founder and CEO of Evergreen, and Anna is a senior manager for social impact at ABBev Sciences. First off, Anna and Greg, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. To set the stage, I'm going to just ask each of you for a brief overview of your organizations and the work and how it links to the circular economy for food. Anna, let's start with you. Can you tell us about ABBev, how the products work, and the impact that you guys are hoping to achieve?
Yeah, happy to. Pleasure to be here. Excited to talk about ABBev and the circular economy. So at ABBev, we're really dedicated to seeing a transition to a more sustainable food system. And the way that we're approaching that is by being unwaste warriors. And while my background here might be a little glib, it's about enabling longer lasting produce to fight food waste, all the way from kind of the farm and the pack house through to the kitchen. So our founders developed a plant-based technology that creates an extra peel. It's kind of a little layer on top of the peels that already exists in fruits and vegetables, and it helps them last up to twice as long. And we are seeing reductions at the retail level and hoping to do more at the consumer level as well. But our technology works by keeping water on the inside and keeping oxygen outside. And that helps slow the process of oxidation and the causes of spoilage. So we're in certain produce right now, everything from citrus to avocados, organic apples, and continuing to measure our impact by using life cycle assessments to see that when we reduce waste at different points in the supply chain, how that translates into avoided carbon emissions throughout the whole system, as well as water. And so we measure those impacts through partnership with our retail partners and our supplier partners, and look to see how that contributes to our goals for a sustainable food system.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. And I appreciate that you're already talking about partners. I'll come back to that in a moment. But first, I want to hand it over to Greg. Greg, can you give us a bit of an overview of Evergreen, how it works, and and the impact that you are looking to unlock with the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So Seth, just firstly, I thank you for having me on and talking about such an important topic like circular economy and changing and transforming the food system. So Evergreen is a sustainable ingredient company. And what we do is we make plant-based products taste better, we make them healthier, and we make them more sustainable. And we do that in perhaps a unique way where we capture barley nutrients that are left over from the beer brewing process. And we transform those into world-class, best tasting and sustainable ingredients. So our EverPro product can make a fantastic plant-based milk that has the same nutrition as dairy milk. And our EverVita flour can make breads and pastas healthier by reducing starch and increasing protein and fiber. And when we do that, because we're using a byproduct, our greenhouse gas emissions are anywhere between 40 to 80% lower than other sources of protein or of fiber. So that's what Evergreen's all about.
Awesome. Great. And before we kind of dive into the specifics, I'd also like to get a high level, your high level thoughts on kind of the importance of collaboration and partnership in your work. Anna, you mentioned the words partnerships and partners right off the bat. So I'll come back to you and curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think partnerships are really critical to our work in a variety of different ways. And it comes back to appeal values. We have values of ingenuity, which is about asking the right questions, and teamwork, which is pretty self-explanatory, but also humility. And for me, humility is about learning from our different partners. You know, we have scientists and we have expertise in our technology, but we've also had to learn about how our product works. It's put into real life scenarios. And so our partners are really key to that. A partner like Howlings, who's worked with us on removing plastic for cucumbers. You know, this is an experiment that we're working on together where our teams are working side by side with technology and trying different things. And then on the retail side, a partner like Kroger, who's committed to zero hunger, zero waste, and looking to see how we can measure food waste reduction in the stores. And that's a lot more difficult than it seems. And there's nuances in every organization, and trying to control for COVID and creating A/B tests so that we can actually validate our impact. And then the other piece I would say is particularly working in produce categories that are global, being exported from emerging markets, for example, having partners on the ground who can help us understand the situation and the challenges from farmers and producers, how they would like to see our technology work. And so I can speak to some of those partners in a little bit. I know you want to tee that up later, Seth, but yeah, I'd say in general, partners are really essential when you're introducing a new technology and trying to learn how it works in real life settings, and making sure that the impacts are validated.
Awesome. Great. And Greg, how about at Evergreen? How does collaboration feed into the philosophy and the ethos of the company?
Yeah, our experience is very similar to Anna at Appeal. Evergreen was really founded by several different organizations, including the University of Cork in Ireland. So I was working on a small team in Belgium and responsible for the supply at ABBev, and responsible for the supply chain of barley going into a brewery and barley leaving a brewery. And we was as a part of the small team, we're asking questions like, well, and we were new, like, why does barley go into a brewery and why does barley leave a brewery? And we partnered with the University of Cork in Ireland, who helped us overcome a lot of the technical challenges that are associated with barley and capturing those nutrients and transforming them into ingredients. And then of course we partner with local companies, local startups as well, who are particularly focused in delivering that nutrition in a very healthy, sustainable way. So we really recently announced a partnership with Post Holdings and the Airly brand, which is launching climate positive snacking, right? And we think that is just the first of many products to come and across a lot of different applications, a lot of different products.
Awesome. I really like hearing the climate positive snacking framework there, because I think one of the things that makes me most excited about the circular economy for food is that it's not about doing less bad, it's about doing more good and really getting to the point where we're having a net positive impact, not just reducing our negative externalities. So that's really exciting. And I think one of the other takeaways that I just grabbed from hearing both of you talk right there is it's really important to get the right capabilities together in the team. We're dealing with some pretty complex stuff when we're thinking about circular economy for food, and not any one organization or one person is going to be able to bring all the needed capabilities to bear. So it's really important to have the team and be conscious of having the right roles and capabilities to come together kind of as puzzle pieces to make the whole. So that's awesome to hear. Now, diving into the details a little bit more, I'm hoping you can both share a bit of a case study of what this looks like in practice. Anna, I'll come over to you first and ask about the work that you're doing in Kenya with the Farm to Market Alliance. Can you tell the audience about the partnership?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is a in the works case study. We're kind of mid project, which is really exciting to be able to share what we're trying to do. So currently, ABBev works quite extensively in avocados, treating avocado. We call it a treatment when we apply our coating in the import side at Netherlands and in the US, but also in export and in Latin America. But we have not been in Africa yet commercially. So what we're hoping to do with the Farm to Market Alliance is to see how the ABBev product works when we're using it in Kenya, hoping that can reduce loss in transit, and then how that translates ultimately back to farmers. Can we create a framework so that the supply chain is stronger, that there's more income opportunities for farmers? So the Farm to Market Alliance works in East Africa primarily to create stronger market systems for farmers, working with farmer cooperatives. And they've been a really valuable partner for us, helping us connect the dots from everything from regulatory approvals and who we need to talk to there, and starting now on monitoring and evaluation, seeing what the situation is for the farmers. And they'll be kind of following us throughout this process in the avocado season, which is underway right now, to see if we can prove that, with the introduction of ABBev in this situation, we're able to create better income opportunities for the farmers, and then how ultimately we could look to scale that in future years.
Awesome. And just a quick follow-up there, and I know this isn't in process, this is like a live case study, as you mentioned. Could you talk a little bit more about what that process, how do you think about the driving that value up the supply chain back to the farmers? What's the approach that you guys are taking with that?
Yeah, we're experimenting to see if, with a reduction of loss in transit and other value that ABBev can bring, can that create a premium for an exporter? And can that premium then be shared with those farmers, either at an end of season bonus, for example, is one of the things we're looking at. So it's definitely an experiment, and it's new to us. We can help preserve the quality and extend that shelf life of fruit, but it also takes further development. And what we've seen is making sure that the harvesting techniques are right, that the farmers have the right access to inputs, that they're not damaged on the way to the pack house. And so when we think about partnerships and ultimately the whole circular economy, it is going to take different actors, making sure that we get as much from the field to the pack house, and then with Appeal, adding that extra layer of protection, how that can make sure that everything that is grown gets to that consumer table, and all of the resources going into that are avoided emissions and water. And then on the social impact side, how without that loss, that can create better income opportunities as well. So we really see it as being win-win for environment and social in what we're trying to achieve.
Awesome. Great. And Greg, over to you. I know obviously ABBev's a big partner of Evergreen. I'd be curious to share some more about the mechanics of your partnership with them, as well as how you engage and partner with other businesses as well.
Sure, absolutely. So the origins of Evergreen originate, as I mentioned just briefly, from ABBev. They are our parent company. They are our raw material supplier, and they're also heavily vertically integrated, where they have direct relationships with growers that we partner with, and we partner with their smart agriculture team and their malting team as well. And Seth, if you take a step back and you look at like the entire brewing industry, we estimate that there's over 9 million metric tons of what the industry calls spent grain. And spent grain is simply that barley that goes into the brewery. The brewer is removing the starch, and then what's left over is that great source of protein and fiber. That great source of protein and fiber, 9 million metric tons, that can impact hundreds of millions or billions of people. So our aspiration is to not only partner with great companies and great brewers like AB InBev, but also other brewers, as well as other manufacturers that might have byproducts that currently don't go to use. And Evergreen's technology is foundational, where we can accept a lot of different raw materials outside of just barley.
Awesome. That's fascinating. I don't think I realized that barley is just the beginning. So that's an exciting.
Yeah, barley, just the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like that, the opportunity here is huge. When you talk about like 1/3 of all food is going to waste, right? So it's great. You see companies like Appeal, limiting that, but at the food manufacturing side, there's still quite a bit that hopefully companies like Evergreen can better capture those lost nutrients.
Yeah. One of the things that I've come to say in the world of circular economy is that we just have to get rid of the concept of waste, and we have to unwaste everything and be really thinking about it's wasted materials, it's wasted value. There's stuff there. We just have to be creative and open our minds to see it and kind of leave the old paradigm of waste behind us. So it's exciting to just to hear about the possibilities there. Now this question, this next one's for both of you as well. One of the things that is really exciting about the circular economy for food for me is that it I would say it implies a strong emphasis on community engagement, local support, working with the communities in which you operate. Can you both kind of share a little bit more about how you work with the communities that you operate in? And maybe Greg, I'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, for sure. So the great news about our business model is that when we capture nutrients from breweries, those breweries tend to be around major urban centers. So beer is not like a great product. Generally, they get shipped like all around the world. It's predominantly a very local business. And so when our facility is either on site to the brewery or very, very close to it, we're capturing those nutrients. And as I mentioned, like one of our key products here is a nutritional flour that's ideal for breads and pastas. And so bakeries, like breweries, are also tend to be very local businesses. So one of the examples here is we partnered within St. Louis. We partnered with a local bakery called Companion Bakery, where we are now producing a high protein and a high fiber bread that we used in a very difficult times, like during the height of the pandemic, that we donated 2,000 loaves to area food banks. So that's a great example of, like, you know, a local ingredient company and a local bakery coming together to really help the community.
And just double clicking into that, I think this is a key component here. Could you explain for the audience why beer is a local product? Like, why is it that breweries usually are set up and distribute to their local communities?
Yeah, it really really gets down to the packaging isn't glass, which doesn't transport very well. It's heavy. It's bulky. In Europe, there's a returnable bottle system that we don't have in the U.S. It would be awesome to have that in the U.S. Talk about circularity. In the U.S., ironically used to have it. But yeah, so because of those reasons, because of the packaging, because of the weight and the size of the liquid and things like that, that's predominantly why it's a very local business.
Yeah, so many things I could dive into here, but first, Anna, back over to you. Curious how ABBev thinks about its engagement with the communities that you work with.
Yeah, I guess one place to start would be to share a little bit more about how we work. So we create our coating, but really we integrate at the pack house, and so that means that our team members, we call them our technical field specialists, are working hand in hand with the teams. So we have our employees around the globe who are then integrated into these pack houses with our supplier partners, and we work to make sure that they feel a part of our ABBev network. And then from a scientific perspective, we also, while an avocado from a consumer perspective might look the same, whether it's from Peru or from Kenya, we have to make sure that we understand that product, how that product might change in size over the season as humidity changes and other aspects. And so not having a one size fits all approach to our product and our processes, make sure that we are creating the optimal solution for any given supply chain and the nodes within that. And so we're learning that over time and trying to see where the specific pain points are. With Kenya, we understand that some of the value we are hypothesizing that some of the value we might bring maybe because there's in that area more delays at the port, and so with that unpredictability in that market, how can ABBev really help to alleviate some of that risk that would otherwise be there because of the Suez Canal blockage, for example, or roads being washed out from rains. And so, it goes back to kind of understanding the local situation, understanding our technology, and then working together to see where we can help resolve some of those pain points, or at least understand them so that we can work around them where possible.
Yeah. And just a quick follow-up here. How do you go about the exploration of the local context? How do you figure out, it's fantastic, it's not a one size fits all approach. I think that's a lesson that we're learning right now in this world of sustainable business, is that you have to have very contextualized approaches that are right for the local context, for the local communities, and the technology components are all matching up well as well. So I'm curious, how do you figure out what are the constraints that you need to be flexible and work around in a given context?
I think it's always a learning process, but at least from kind of the onset, one of our key partners is the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, and they're helping expand our work in emerging markets. And part of that, in working with their Agri Advisory Services team, is what we're calling kind of a pre-implementation research, where some of their teams and consultants on the ground are interviewing producers, looking at the situation for us, because we can't be there if we're not there yet, and so having that resource is super valuable for us to get a better lay of the land, and see where we might be most effective when we're looking to expand further.
Yeah. Awesome, cool. And one of the kind of things that jumped to my mind hearing both of you talk right there is ABBev, you're co-locating yourselves in the pack houses, and Greg, you guys are co-locating with the brewery. So kind of, again, that emphasis on local industrial symbiosis is a heady term, but I feel like that's what we're seeing a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've noticed, just to step building on that observation, we've noticed a synergy in the two facilities working together in terms of like excess heat and energy and things like that. So there's definitely a symbiotic relationship, or complementary. Mm-hmm.
And we have a question here from the audience for Anna that I want to just jump in and share. Curious if, like, coming from the social impact perspective, especially how, if ABBev had any conversations around disaster relief and how the product could be used in situations where, yeah, there's an urgent need and fresh produce supply is limited.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, something that I've certainly thought about, and we'll see how our business model continues to evolve. Right now, we tend to kind of, like I talked about earlier, kind of integrate with the pack house. So that's a really long-term kind of process of bringing in our engineers and our equipment and kind of setting up for the future. And so if the disasters are kind of already occurred, that's not really the best situation for us to come in based on what we're currently able to do. But we definitely are interested in continuing to learn about our technology and explore where that can be utilized at different points around the world.
Awesome. Your response there just sparks another thought that I just had is when you're thinking about this co-location model and we're talking about partnerships, that has to be a long-term relationship, right? We're not talking about a year-to-year, very transactional relationship. This involves infrastructure being built in our close areas with your core partners. And so I'd be curious, kind of how you think about the length of your relationships with your key partners. And Anna, maybe with you first, with the pack houses, what's that look like?
I think like one really great example of our partners is Nature's Pride. We've been working with Nature's Pride for a few years now on avocados, and continuing to explore different areas that we can develop our technology together. One being, we announced last week our acquisition of Impact Vision, which is hyperspectral imaging, which will allow us to really see inside produce to better understand ripeness and freshness and quality factors. And so working with Nature's Pride, we're kind of in the trenches together in their facility in the Netherlands, working together. So I can't speak to the kind of specific terms of any individual engagement, but we have a product life cycle, which includes kind of testing and development. So we may be working with different partners as we're exploring, maybe a different produce category or in a different market, before we kind of have our kind of bigger equipment and kind of full commercial launch. So we try to work with our partners across that spectrum and see where it makes the most sense for both parties.
Yeah. And how about you, Greg, in terms of the relationships and the length? Like, how does the long-term relationships? How do you build them at Evergreen?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for us, long-term is extremely important. Number one, our partnership with the brewery, I mean, we're going to be building like a food ingredients facility, right? That can last, 30, 50, 100 years, right? So having that source of grain supply will be really, really important. They're not facilities that you can get up and just move around, right? And then our partnership with the University of Cork in Ireland is now reaching, I think, nearly 10 years. And what we have seen there is that just building upon all earlier successes and all earlier knowledge, and you're getting better over the course of time. And I would say that partnership, as well as some other partnerships that we have, are so much more effective because they are long-term in length and also long-term in focus. While there's always some short-term things you always need to focus on, you also need to recognize that like sometimes systematic change and transformational change doesn't happen like overnight. And I think that's what's made our partnership with the University in Cork so successful and so beneficial, mutually beneficial.
That's awesome. A 10-year relationship with an academic institution, something to be commended. So that's awesome. And I think it also just goes to highlight the point, like there's both ABBev and Evergreen, there's this technology component, but then as we're discussing, there's also these relationships that surround the technology and how it's delivered and scaled for that transformational change that you're touching on, Greg. I have another question here from the audience about the location where you guys currently operate. And I think you've touched on a little bit that Kenya is kind of your first foray into Africa, but and this question is specific to sub-Saharan Africa, but I'm going to blow it up to the whole globe. I'd be curious just to get both of your kind of footprints across the globe currently. And Anna, I'll hand it over to you first.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, in working with the IFC, that is a partnership that an investment that we entered into last fall. And so we're in the early stages of building out our plans in emerging markets beyond our current footprint. So in Africa, our focus is on Kenya and South Africa. In Latin America, we're in Mexico right now, but looking at Peru and Chile. And then kind of in terms of our current operational footprint, we have integrations within the United States and Texas and the Northeast and California, as well as in Europe and the Netherlands and Spain.
Awesome. And how about Evergreen? I know it's a lot of exciting announcements and action here domestically in the US, but curious as you think about long-term ambitions and scaling, what's the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently operate today in Belgium and in the US, but our 10-year plan includes expansions into every major continent, right? So certainly into China, India, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, Brazil, Mexico, right? So where there's a brewery, there's an opportunity to capture those nutrients, capture that protein, capture that fiber, and return it directly to the consumer. And barley protein is it's a high quality plant protein. So particularly in developing countries, we think that it can make a difference in terms of improving consumer health.
Awesome. It's looking at the Q&A coming in, it looks like you both may have some folks in South Africa that are interested in exploring collaborations in the near future. I know that a lot of the people in the audience are tuning in for their entrepreneurs or practitioners themselves, and they're looking for inspiration, looking for lessons learned, best practices. I'm curious if for both of you to hear your advice, what do you have for the collaborators and entrepreneurs in the audience today based on your work to date? How do you have the success? How do you drive success both the business and importantly for the impact as well. And I will go to Greg first.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's really a couple, lessons learned in terms of the Evergreen story. One of which is, when I was working on that small team and I'm watching barley leave a brewery and it's going, hundreds of kilometers to a dairy farm, that problem isn't necessarily, it's a world's problem, but it wasn't. I also have to find a way to capture those nutrients and then solve a consumer problem with it. So my problem isn't, or the world's problem isn't necessarily the company's problem. We have to, for us, it goes back to the consumer and what does the consumer asking for? What do they need? What are their challenges? And so you might see a lot of problems. And I mean, there's a lot of problems in the food value chain. But you also need to, when you solve that food value chain problem, you also need to be solving like the consumer problem. And we were extremely lucky that barley protein and barley fiber is such a great source of nutrition that tastes well and makes people healthier, right? And so, and we saw a need for that consumer problem was, hey, Greg, hey, Evergreen, help make plant-based products taste better. And that was the consumer problem that we were able to solve. And then we solved basically two problems at one time. I think the second, recommendation outside of just focusing on the consumer problem or the problem that your business is trying to solve. The second one is you have to be patient. So this journey that Evergreen has been on started in 2013. And it started working on this at night and we had day jobs, right? And that's how many companies get started, right? Is through a continuous building of the business with spare time, and then eventually you reach that critical point where you can dedicate all your time to it. So be patient and keep going, and that would be my recommendation.
One quick reaction there, and this is something that I wanted to touch on earlier, but lost my train of thought, is one of the things that's really interesting for me about Evergreen is the protein content of the high quality protein. And what's exciting to me is thinking about when we're talking about the systems transformation, what does it thinking about not just, okay, great, people have another source of protein, but also can it offset and reduce dependency on animal grown protein as well, given that it's such a major contributor to land use change, deforestation, and therefore global warming. Yeah. How does that figure into your kind of the strategy or the impact story for Evergreen?
Yeah, absolutely, Seth. If you look at the food value chain today, it's heavily dominated. The sources of protein are heavily dominated by soy and pea, and maybe a little bit of rice and a little bit of wheat. And when you look at those consumer products, there's some limitations that are naturally there because of the limitations in the agricultural value chain. And there's actually it's very limited. They say every great innovation or every good startup uncovers hidden truths, right? And we uncovered two hidden truths. One of those hidden truths is that barley is an amazing protein and an amazing nutrient. And the other hidden truth was that it can be used to solve consumer problems. That consumers are desiring better plant-based milks. They're desiring healthier breads and pastas. So for us, we saw it. While barley will never be 70% or 60% of the market, that's not our aspiration. Our aspiration is to really bring that additional protein and fiber to the market at large scale. And even being 5% of the market can have a huge, huge impact on the world and on consumers.
And I have another question in here from the audience, and then I'll get back to you, Anna. But Greg, curious to know if there's an opportunity for craft brewers in different regions of the US or globally, for that matter of fact, to engage with Evergreen, or are you really at this point limited to larger scale industrial brewing?
Yeah, right now we can make the biggest impact in the world through large brewers. And so that's really the initial priority, because that's, again, how we impact the world. But we do see an opportunity to work with craft brewers. Our recommendation to craft brewers today is gather your spent grain and dry it. That's the best thing that you can do. And through some very simple processing that will provide guidance on, that can be incorporated into breads and pastas. So we will ultimately have a solution for both. Right now, the focus is on large, simply because that's where the impact to the world is going to be. But craft brewers, we will have a solution for them here shortly. But there's some things that they can do in the interim, and encourage anyone that's in that industry to reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so Anna, back over to you from your work in this space today. What are your kind of best practices, lessons learned, best advice for the entrepreneurs and practitioners amongst us today?
Yeah, so I think the theme of the day is obviously partnerships, and having those partnerships is critical, and part of that is having that vision and values alignment. And we've seen that with some of our strongest partners, like Kroger. And the other thing I would say is making sure you understand all of the nodes that you might be touching with your solution, because it's one thing to have a technology, and it's another thing to see how people react to that technology based on kind of the current status quo. One of the favorite stories we talk about at ABBev is how in some cases a supplier might be saying, actually trash can is my best friend, because then a buyer may be looking to buy more. And so how do we overcome that, and how do we create that understanding and create kind of new systems thinking to say, well, actually, if you've got more produce that lasts longer, that can increase sales as well. And so it will create, and goes back to kind of your point, Greg, that patience of giving people time to think about and get creative, and bring them on that journey towards kind of that new future circular food system that might have different incentives and different structures and different opportunities. And how can you see something like waste and turn that into what might be kind of currently an invisible tax to an invisible savings account that can be utilized in different ways to make progress towards some of those shared goals.
I love that framing, the invisible tax to the invisible savings account. I may have to borrow that one in the future. Well, I just want to double click into your point about understanding the different nodes, because when we're talking about systems change, obviously it's critical, and it can definitely become overwhelming when you start to map these things out. Could you talk a little bit more, like in the most practical or tactical terms that you can? How do you go about kind of mapping an ecosystem to understand these potential impacts and the knock-on effects?
Yeah, that's one of the key things that our product managers do when we're looking at a different category. They'll look at what's going on from the producer standpoint, an importer standpoint, a retailer standpoint, and one of those nodes that we understand anecdotally, but there's really not a lot of evidence on is the consumer side, and that was Greg touched on earlier as well, is really understanding what consumers are facing. We know from the data that a lot of waste is happening at consumer households, but for ABBev, we can see in our lab settings that watching the fruit on a table, that the peeled fruit lasts longer. But how does that actually change consumers, and what ends up in their own personal compost or waste trash can at home? And so we're interested in continuing to explore what our impact is for consumers that are ultimately taking those produce home.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep on this thread here about the consumers, because I think it's such a important point. And I'm curious for both of you, how do you go about, I would say, like the customer discovery process, or the maybe said in a different way, how do you understand, how do consumers make decisions when it comes to the spaces that you operate in? And just continuing with you, what's that look like?
Yeah, we've got a wonderful marketing team that does consumer research, and one of the things is everyone talks about fresh, but what does that actually mean? Is that smelling? Is that feeling? Is that looking? And what's the exact kind of composition or of that decision at the point of sale? Doing research and hoping to do more with our partners, but it'll be a continual journey to look at kind of what actually happens, but then also kind of what decisions consumers make and why.
Yeah. Greg, how about you? How do you guys engage with consumers to understand what they're looking for?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research around this, really across the globe, and there's a remarkable set of similarities in terms of the consumer. And really, I call it the global consumer. They're becoming very knowledgeable on. I think at first it was like packaging waste and plastics in the oceans and things like that. Then now they're increasingly becoming aware of food waste, and it's top of mind for the consumer. And now they're becoming increasingly aware of the importance of like plant-based diets and things like that. So our research is showing that it is top of mind for those three issues are top of mind for the consumer, and the companies that can solve that problem while still meeting like the taste requirements, while still meeting health requirements. If you can solve that problem and sustainability, that is a winning value proposition to the consumer, because our research shows that they care extensively about it.
Yeah, awesome. Great. So we are kind of getting to the end of our hour here. We could continue on for forever, but I'm very curious you're both kind of deep in this space, and one of the exciting things and things that gets people energized and ready to go out there and take actions, take risks in the pursuit of it, is to know what's coming next, what's on the horizon. So Greg, coming to you first, what's the most interesting and impactful development that you're seeing in your space in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I think we're really at the dawn of like a revolution in terms of systematic change in our food system. And I think ABBev and Evergreen are two great examples of really capturing and leveraging technology in completely different ways to solve food system challenges. And I think there is many more startups just like both of these companies coming all around the world. And then you think about the world is in the future we'll be creating our own ingredients, right? So the bio revolution and the fermentation of proteins and the fermentation of a lot of different things will really revolutionize food, and we'll go from a system of extraction to and a system, as you said, minimize badness, to actually a system of net positive. And I think that journey, while it may seem slow at first, is likely to be in an S curve and accelerate tremendously over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we'll look back on this and say, wow, that's amazing. And I think ABBev and Evergreen are just the first examples of that.
And what do you see on the horizon? What gets you most excited about the future here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with this year being the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables, we've seen so much development in packaged goods and shelf stable goods. But when we think about health, around the world, and we think about the importance of fruits and vegetables, seeing what we can do to better match that supply and demand, and ultimately increase demand, make it easier for people to consume healthier fruits and vegetables is super exciting. And with our new venture into kind of this hyperspectral imaging, really looking at each piece of produce and saying, okay, this is the ideal timeline that when this piece of fruit will ripen, and how can we get that to a consumer at the right point? And if it's going to take longer, if this one's got kind of a longer shelf life to that peak ripeness, can we send that further away? And those that we've got just a day or two, getting that to the right place and pairing that up. So I think that's one of the things that really gets me excited. And then, seeing how we can change consumer behavior, make it easier to be a part of change and sustainability. In my background here, we've got kind of hashtag unwaste Wednesdays. And so we're trying to create a movement, trying to create, that mindfulness of let's take that time on Wednesday to remember what we have in our fridge, how we can, best plan and get creative with recipes, and really be a part of that sustainability food system by drilling into the waste topic.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think that's a great kind of call to action here is for everybody, whether you're on the west coast of the US and you're starting out your day with breakfast, or you're in Africa or Europe or Asia and it's into your evening now and it's dinner time. Go check out your fridge and your pantry and see what's in there that you can use up today so it doesn't get wasted. And I think one of the things that has a thread through our conversation here today that I think it's really interesting that it came up, because it wasn't in our kind of our prep discussion so much, as this importance of kind of diet and consumer behavior and consumer preferences for increasingly this plant-based or planetary healthy diet when we're making the PACE action agenda and doing our consultations within the community. Initially we're like, no, we're going to leave diet off the table, like that's its own whole thing. But the more we talk to people and the more we talk to, it's like, in order to think about a circular food system, it's not just about how we grow our food, but it's also about what we are growing and what we are eating. And both Evergreen and ABBev are leading the way in making these planetary healthy, so both healthy for the planet as well as for the individual options available. And so that it's a really exciting time, and it sounds like there's only more exciting things to come in the future. So with our last 5 minutes here, I'll just save a moment and see if either of you have any kind of final thoughts before we sign off here. Greg, I'll start with you.
No, Seth, just want to thank you again. And Anna, it's so great to hear about ABBev and the journey that you're on. It's a source of inspiration. And no, I think, from an Evergreen perspective, we're really excited about the future. And that, if there's interest in collaborations on many different levels, whether it be a startup that's looking to launch a great, nutritious, and sustainable product to consumers, or if it's a technology provider, or if it's a local entrepreneur, we're happy to partner. And we definitely see a healthier and more sustainable future.
Awesome. And Anna, any final thoughts from our unwaste warrior?
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Greg, and Seth. Thank you for organizing this. I guess my final thought would be, for those on the line, I assume you're all committed to seeing a more sustainable food system, a more circular food system, and really leaning into the idea of partnerships and reaching out. I think there's so much work going on right now, and so many organizations that are trying to create this future that is better for people and better for planet, and reaching out and building those partnerships. I think in my experience, everyone has been so generous with their time and their resources, that picking up the phone or Zoom, that reaching out and building those collaborations together is the best way to oversee the growth and development of impact.
Awesome. Great. Well, Greg and Anna, thank you so much for joining us today to share more about the Evergreen and ABBev stories. It's really exciting to see your two companies out there at the front, really starting to take the circular economy for food approaches to scale at a global level. And so that's really exciting. Just quickly reflecting on the conversation that we've had over this last hour, a couple of key points that jump out to me are the importance of being local and everything being contextualized to the local environment. And part of that undoubtedly is that you're going to be building long-term relationships. You need to be in it with the right partners who are bringing the right capabilities together, given the complexity of the challenges we are trying to solve, not only the complexities, but also the nuances at that local level. And I think the point also about thinking for the entrepreneurs on the line, thinking about how do you solve the customer's problem and not just the global problem. I think that's an awesome takeaway as well, because that's how you really get people to act, right? As you solve their problem. And in that, we're all making the efforts towards them solving the global problem as well. So thank you both for the time today, and for everybody on the line. I hope you will join us next month, where we will be discussing farmer-centric transitions to regenerative agriculture. And in the meantime, keep up the great work, and don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in partnering or collaborating with the three of us. So we are in it for the long haul, and I hope everybody is inspired to join us on the journey. Awesome. Take care for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.